Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. My name is Clayton, also known as George Pig, and I am the community manager here at Refold. Today, I have a very special guest, Pablo from Dreaming Spanish. You may know him from his very large channel. He is a huge advocate of CI and also a large CI or comprehensible input content creator. Okay, so Pablo, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Um, So let's see here. Pablo, you are from Dreaming Spanish, but do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, so we make content for people to learn Spanish through immersion. We make comprehensible input content, for now video content, and we're creating like a whole catalog of people to be able to receive. Right now we're aiming for 1,000 hours of content available for people to get, basically to go from knowing zero Spanish to getting to the level in which they're really gonna benefit more from watching series, watching movies, and maybe going to live to a Spanish-speaking country than what they can get from our content.
And here at Refold, we really like comprehensible input. We like, CI content. We like learning through immersion. And I have to say, it is a shame that other languages do not have these resources.
Yeah. Well, I know people who want to learn Spanish have been lucky, I guess, because I really felt that this content was necessary, because I started learning Chinese. I tried to learn Chinese with comprehensible input, and this was in 2016, and there was very little content. So, well, basically nothing. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to make it myself, and I'm a native Spanish speaker, so I started with Spanish. Hopefully in the future we can do other languages. But yeah, right now many people complain that, oh, there's so much for Spanish. I've been spoiled. Now I want to learn another language, and there's nothing comparable to it.
So what sort of inspired you to start a CI channel for Spanish? So you mentioned that you started Chinese and you wanted to do CI. So how did you get into CI, I guess?
Okay, so that kind of is related to my history of language learning. And besides, yeah, having learned English to a decent level, having gone abroad to study in university in English, the first time that I could say that learning languages became my hobby was when I went to live in Japan, and I started learning Japanese through AJAT. So I guess we kind of have the same origins as Refold.
Interesting. I did not know
Yeah.
that you had a back. So I knew a little bit about your history with like ALG.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name? It was his last name Brown.
Marvin Brown, yes.
Marvin Brown, yeah. So I knew a little bit about your background with ALG and with Thai because, Marvin Brown sort of founded ALG with Thai as a basis, but I had no clue that you were a former AJATer.
Yeah, yes. It's good. Got me here. Like without AJAT, I would not be here for sure.
Okay, interesting. And
So
you,
yes, when I basically got a scholarship to go do a PhD in Japan, and at that time I started looking into learning Japanese, and luckily for me, I discovered AJAT, and it went super well. I did the whole remembering the kanji. I started using Anki for like sentences and vocabulary and stuff. That didn't work for me, so I continued just with the input and using Anki for the kanji. But I did that for 6 months, went to Japan, lived there for 4 years, and learned Japanese very well. And I was doing a PhD in computer science, but that turned out to didn't turn out into anything. I got really bored with my research, so I decided to do something else with my life. And I had learned Japanese very well, so I thought, okay, I learned Japanese having a lot of fun. Most people don't know that you can learn a language like this. So I'm gonna try to contribute to the world and try to let people know that there's a better way to learn languages. And at that point, started to do some research and found out about this school in Bangkok that also really matched very well with my experiences learning Japanese with AJAT. So I decided to go there, and I kind of did an experiment and went there for 1 year and studied Thai for 1,000 hours.
So what exactly is your background with languages? So you've mentioned AJAT, you've mentioned the ALG with Thai,
Yes.
and I guess obviously we're conversing right now in English. So and you also mentioned Chinese back, I think you said in 2016. So what all languages have you attempted to learn?
So I studied a little bit of French and English when I was in school. After that, I kind of acquired a lot of English without trying much, because I was into programming and like internet stuff. So many times I just had to read stuff in English. And without realizing it too much, I kind of learned English to an okay level. My last year of university, I went to study 1 year in Finland and I improved my English. Then I got a scholarship to do a master's in California, and I went there for 1.5 years, and there I got to a level in which I was okay with my level of English. When I was there, I also learned some French. Later on, when was that? Yeah, after that I went to Japan. While I was in Japan, and I got to a level in Japanese in which I was comfortable with it. I kind of also did an experiment with French, and I got 800 hours of input in French. So I got to an okay level, I think an okay level in French, like good comprehension. And when I've tried to have conversations, it went okay. I haven't lived in France, so I don't have a lot of experience speaking. And then, yes, I went to Thailand for 1 year. I did 1,000 hours in the school. After that, I really wanted to continue with my Thai and get to a good level. And yeah, I kept up with it, both through consuming content, like a lot of cartoons at the beginning and Thai TV dramas after that. And also I continued in contact with a girl here in Thailand, which later on would become my girlfriend and wife. And yeah, and eventually I also got to a good level in Thai in which I'm comfortable with life here, with doing basically anything that I need to do. And finally I got to like focus on learning Mandarin, because it's something that I had wanted to learn for a long time, even before I started learning Japanese. And yeah, for a while, I don't know, for 1.5 years, I got to focus in Chinese. I was working, so I got to do maybe around 2 hours of input per day on average. And then earlier this year, my son was born, so I don't have any more time for Chinese, but hopefully soon I can go back to, I don't know, at least getting 1 hour or 2 a day.
So I'm glad that you mentioned 2 hours a day with a job. I think that's really reasonable. So we do some coaching at Refold, and a lot of people, they come in with this old school mindset of, the old AJAT days, when people they're in their teens and early 20s, and they can spend 8 hours
I was doing
a day.
like every waking hour with Japanese.
But when you get old, when you're in your 30s or 40s, 2 hours a day is very reasonable for most people. Much more than that, and you're sacrificing other things, right? Your wife, your baby, your work. So I'm glad that you mentioned 2 hours a day. And it sounds like Mandarin has been a bit of your white whale, as it were. Well, if you're familiar with Moby Dick, something that you wanted to do and didn't really get to do. And that's very interesting. I did not know that you were such a linguistically diverse person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chinese has been something that I've always wanted to learn, but there was always something else that got in the way. Now it's my son, but hopefully I can get back to it. Right now I'm at a level with Mandarin in which I'm at the intermediate level, so I can benefit from content that's only audio or like conversation with with Chinese speakers. I don't need like the really easy stuff for beginners. So from here on, it's not that difficult. Yeah, other than that, maybe some Italian. We traveled to Italy last Christmas, so I got a few months of like listening to podcasts and stuff. But for somebody like me who has as native language to have Spanish and Catalan, and I know quite a bit of French, understanding Italian is super easy.
So Catalan is also one of your native languages.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. So do you have plans to do a Dream in Catalan in the future?
People have asked for it, but I'm sorry to say that we're gonna have to do first the more mainstream languages, the ones that have more people who want to learn them.
Okay. Catalan
it would be
surprises me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it surprises me because it's for a language of just a couple million speakers, 6 or 8 million speakers. It has a very rich literary like scene. Like a lot of books are translated into the language. There are YouTube channels. It's very well supported for a language of its size and status. So
yeah. I know many Catalan people have a kind of a pride of their own culture, and there's also been a big push from the government to translate books, to dub movies and TV.
Yeah, and speaking of Italy, I think it's also spoken in Italy. I think
a little bit in Corsica, I think.
Yeah, maybe Alighieri, I forget where. But yes, very cool. But unfortunately, you're right. It is a regional language, and it's probably not one that is suitable for producing content if your goal is to expand.
It's cool because if we eventually get to do it, I myself will be able to appear in the videos, because for all languages, for sure, we're going to get native speakers.
Yeah, I've heard that Catalan is sort of like an intermediate between like Spanish and French. I've heard claims.
Has certain elements of both, yeah, especially in the grammar.
Yeah. So being that you have all of this sort of experience with different languages, what has it been like? So, you've learned Thai, you are learning Mandarin, you've got experience with Japanese, French, Italian, Spanish, and Catalan. That gives you a lot of metalinguistic awareness, a lot of background. And what has it been like, learning a language like Japanese versus learning a language like Thai or Mandarin? I imagine Thai and Mandarin feel more similar because the grammar and the tones.
Thai and Mandarin feel very similar because of like most things, really, being like kind of syllable based, having tones, having very short words. The grammar is so similar. Yeah. And the experience, I don't know. I mean, it's been fun. For sure, Japanese is, the way it works, morphology and stuff is so much fun, but also so different compared to Thai and Mandarin. But Thai and Mandarin, yeah, it's a lot more, you can just focus on learning words, on getting exposure, finding like new words to acquire. But also, yeah, I don't know, like in terms of, because my experience to learn languages, it's mostly about what I do to learn them, right? Like whether I know, when I was in Japan, I lived in a share house with Japanese people. When I'm here, so yeah, I was talking for a long time. Like every day, I would talk for an hour or two with my girlfriend through video calls when I got back to Spain. About like linguistic things, yeah, I don't know, just being a bit curious and noticing things. Oh, like this is the way tones work, or this is the way you place things. And sometimes you try to think the way you put together a sentence and try to think how the way you would put it in English or in your native language. And you think, if I had to explain this to somebody, I wouldn't know even how to begin. Like, it just wouldn't make any sense if you try translating it, right?
Gotcha. And Thai is not what I would call a minor language. So people who don't live in Asia are not necessarily aware that Thailand is sort of like a middle power. Thai dramas are really popular in all of Asia, especially among people who sort of like the boys' love.
Yes, for some reason, yeah.
Thai dramas get dubbed into Filipino, like they
Okay.
get dubbed into other languages. So, and Thailand also gets like official translations of like Korean webtoons, right? Like if you go to like Naver
Okay.
Webtoon, it's got a Thai option. So like, I think Thailand has, I don't know, like 80 million people, something like that. And I definitely would say it's a middle power. So that may surprise people who have not been they've not been to Southeast Asia. But I definitely think that Thai has a lot of content, surprisingly. And
Yeah, it's not difficult to learn it because of how many Thai dramas there are, how much dubbed content there is in Netflix. I cannot believe it, like how many Western series and movies and how many like Korean dramas there are that have been dubbed into Thai. Cartoons, there's so much stuff.
yeah, for sure. And that may surprise people because, people just don't think about it. But there's a lot of content out there. And I guess because of Marvin Brown and ALG, there's a lot of comprehensible input for Thai as well.
Yes, especially after COVID. Basically, the teachers who were working in that school had to find something else to do. And there's been at least like 3 or 4 comprehensible input projects that appear from those teachers.
Yeah, and several of them are quite active. So I'm not a Thai learner myself, but I've helped people in the Refold community who are learning Thai, gathered resources, and helped, sort of coach them on this. And several of them, they post new videos a couple times a week. I mean, there's just heaps of CI content out there for Thai.
Yes. CI content, and then the teachers that I think probably offer either private lessons or group lessons online. So yeah, it's definitely one of the easier languages to learn this way, especially with comprehensible input.
Now, there's a bit of a clicking sound.
Okay.
There we go. Cool. All right. And with Thai, so I have to ask, you speak Spanish and Catalan natively, and you have been able to experience a level of mutual intelligibility with Italian and French. Thai is not a language like in and of itself, like alone, right? There are some relative languages like Isaan up in the north and Lao.
Yeah.
How has your Thai helped you with the sort of regional languages in Thailand or with Lao?
Okay, I'm gonna talk about Isaan and Lao as being the same languages, like there's the 2 words and there are maybe some regional differences, but even most people in Isaan call their own language Lao or say they speak Lao, so I'm not gonna make a distinction. But Thai and Lao, or Thai and Isaan, feel to me a lot closer than, let's say, Spanish to Catalan. I wouldn't call them dialects, but they're for sure closer than any Romance language is to any other Romance language. So yeah, it's been quite comprehensible for me, and there are certain words that I've learned. I continue learning because my wife is from Isaan, and every now and then we go there, visit their family. So I keep learning new words, but a lot of it is pretty readily comprehensible if you know Thai well.
So it's pretty comprehensible. And I imagine, I don't know about Isan people, but I know that in Lao, they use a different like spelling, maybe a different alphabet. Are you able to read Lao at all, or just understand it when it's spoken?
I cannot, I haven't learned to read Lao. If there's something written in Lao and I know what it says, I can figure out, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This looks like that letter in Thai and stuff. But if I see something written and I don't know what it says, I cannot read it.
Okay, so they're not that similar.
No, but if you look at them side by side, probably wouldn't be too hard to memorize the alphabet if you know Thai.
Interesting. And you mentioned that your wife is from Isaan, so you do have that exposure. So that's really cool. People, again, are not aware. Thailand has like 80 different regional languages, um, with Thai being obviously the national language. But there are quite a lot of minority languages as well. So that's another cool part, I guess, about Thailand.
Yes, and actually, I think probably you've seen a poster that people share online that shows how many native speakers there are of each language in like circles. And there's like the inner circle for native speakers and the outer circle for people who've learned it as a second language. And have you seen that?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Thai speakers are actually L2.
So exactly, yeah, Thai is a language that has a lot of people who learn it as a second language. Even though if you actually go and talk to those people, they sound like native speakers because they've learned it since they were little when they started going to school.
Right. So Filipino is the same way. Only 30% of the Philippines speak Filipino as their first language. About 70% of the Philippines actually speak a regional language. But they tend to be quite good. But there are, you can sometimes tell, grammar-wise or pronunciation-wise, like, okay, this person's not an ethnic Tagalog. It's not their native language. And again, this can be surprising to people who are coming from learning Japanese, where everybody's a native speaker, or something like that, where there's just a large portion of non-natives in their own country.
Yeah, Japanese is especially uniform country, even by European standards.
Yeah, so moving back to Dreaming Spanish, your channel is incredibly popular and it's very big. And did you imagine that your channel was going to blow up and be as big as it was when you started?
I mean, I hoped so. After a few years doing it and having, I don't know, a few thousand users or like 10,000 users or so, getting to 100,000 seemed like I didn't know if we would ever gonna make it. The same way as right now, it would be hard for me to imagine that we could ever make it to 1 million. Right now, if you ask me, I would say, no, probably we're never gonna make it to 1 million. Like, who knows, right? I thought the same about 100,000, but I hoped so, and I hope that, I don't know, in the future we will be more popular than Duolingo, not just Dreaming Spanish, but like all the languages. Yeah, I hope so. Let's see.
Now, are you familiar with Reddit?
Yes.
So I don't know if you know this, but a couple of months ago, the big language learning subreddit actually banned Dreaming Spanish posts because they were too popular. Did you hear
mean the
about
Spanish subreddit?
I'm sorry, the Spanish subreddit. Yes, not the language learning subreddit. The Spanish learning subreddit banned Dreaming Spanish posts because they were too popular.
So yes, then there were many posts asking questions that are specific to Dreaming Spanish. And people were asking, yeah, like, oh, what do you do? How do you learn with Dreaming Spanish, etc. And I think by that point, somebody had already created a Dreaming Spanish subreddit. So the mods there created a sticky post and told people to go and subscribe to that, join that subreddit for if they were gonna ask things related to Dreaming Spanish. But there's one thing that the mods didn't say, and the mods never said that it was forbidden to mention Dreaming Spanish at all, even when people ask for resources. But they've actually done it. Like, you comment, you say you recommend somebody Dreaming Spanish when they ask for resources for input or just for listening practice, and your comment will not appear to other people. And that's not on the rules, but the mods are doing that. I don't know, it's very, very strange.
Strange to me because Dreaming Spanish is such a great resource. One of the issues I've run into getting people onto Dreaming Spanish is I'll get people coming to Refold with a middling level of Spanish. They think they're beyond Dreaming Spanish, and they're not aware that Dreaming Spanish actually has content for all levels. You know, yeah, I remember one of the first times I was checking out Dreaming Spanish, I assumed it was going to be beginner content, and I ended up clicking on a video, and you were talking about it was one of your upper level videos. You were talking about testicles, is what I remember.
Okay, shows a
that
good
was
one.
that was like one of the first ones that I saw. I was like, actually, this is pretty interesting. I'm learning about anatomy in Spanish. So how do you deal with that? People come into, they hear Dreaming Spanish, they hear CI content, and they think, oh, this is baby talk. It's only for beginners. I would imagine a lot of people don't know that Dreaming Spanish has content, again, for all levels.
Yeah, I mean, we try to make it as clear as possible. On our YouTube channel, when you go to the front page, you can see we have a carousel for each of the levels. So you can see one playlist for each of the 4 levels that we have. And on the website, we show videos. We sort by new by default. And so you can already see videos at different levels when you first open the website. Yeah, I don't know if we're doing a very good job, but I don't know, we hope that people see that we have videos at different levels.
So what are some of the struggles that you go into creating content, especially for beginners?
So the videos have to be really comprehensible. And as a native speaker, it's very hard to judge if somebody who doesn't know any Spanish is going to be able to understand a video. And not only that, I have to know how to make those, but I also have to teach our guides, our teachers, how to make content like that. And I mean, it's taken time, but I think we're getting better and better at it. And one thing that really helped us was after we made a video, we tried watching it without audio and see if we could understand what the person was saying.
Interesting tactic. And you mentioned your collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go into that? Because I guess you started, it was just you. And then at some point you got these collaborators, these guides. How did you get into that? And how did you know it was time to start adding collaborators?
I knew it was time when I didn't have any time left, any more available time. Basically, yeah, I started posting videos on YouTube by myself every now and then with some friends that just helped me. Eventually, I started a Patreon. I had a Patreon for a long while, but at the beginning it was only donations. And at some point, after a couple of years of starting the channel, I decided to offer premium content, to make videos, to make one video every day for people who were paying above a certain amount on Patreon. And I started making those myself. I started making, besides the, 1 or 2 videos that would go on YouTube, I would make every week 7 videos. And I mean, that took quite a bit of my time. So, but I knew that I wanted to make a lot of content. I wanted to make 1,000 hours of content. So I knew I would gonna have to make even more. So, I mean, since the beginning, it was very clear to me that I needed to hire other people. And I always say that if I had the money, maybe if I had the money, I would have started with Chinese and not Spanish. But even if I did Spanish, I would have, hired somebody who's like more handsome and more funny than me to appear in the videos. I was never intending on becoming famous or being like the only person in the videos. When I was learning Thai, I enjoyed having a variety of teachers, and I think people who learning any language enjoy that, and hearing people who speak using different words, who speak in different ways to get some exposure to the different ways how native speakers may use the language. And yeah, I got to that point in which I was making 7 videos a week, and I decided to start uploading some of that work onto other people. So then I started hiring freelancers and just asking a few people to make just 3 videos a week. And yeah, eventually thing grow. We started making 2 videos per day. Now we make 3 videos per day, three premium videos. And we started hiring people full time. That was it last year? I would say 2 years ago is when we started hiring some teachers full time. We have now Alma, who also coordinates the work of the other teachers. So my work is mostly deciding what we're gonna do. Me and my co-founder, I have a partner now, and deciding what we're gonna do. I learned to do it. I learned to do it well. I learned to teach other people how to do it, and then we move on to the next thing.
Interesting. So, it sounds like there's a lot of potential for you teaching content creators in other languages as well. And like you said, you're going to eventually move into other languages beyond Spanish.
Yeah, definitely. And there have appeared many kind of clones of Dreaming Spanish for different languages. And many of those teachers contacted me and asked me for advice, and I offered them advice and answered their questions and pointed them to some videos that I've made in the past showing how I record videos, how I edit videos, etc.
Now, you are from Spain. And was that ever an issue early on, given that some people avoid Spain Spanish? They prefer, Latin America because America is such a large portion of Spanish speakers, right? Mexico, the United States. Was that ever something that you ran into and you said, I want to get somebody from Latin America on the channel?
There were definitely comments of people who would say, I would prefer a person from Mexico, or who would ask for something like Dreaming Spanish, but for Latin America. What was really funny to me is that even though probably most people in the US would prefer to learn Mexican Spanish, still half of our viewership was people from the US who were learning Spanish from Spain, not because they wanted to learn Spanish from Spain, but in spite of me being from Spain, it still was the best resource that they could find. So they would rather learn Spanish from Spain than do whatever else they could do to learn Spanish.
And I think as of now, you've got a couple of people from different countries. I think you have somebody from Mexico, somebody from Argentina. So, you've definitely expanded, but that's interesting to me. And I'm not super surprised, actually, because I think Spanish learners, I would have to imagine the vast majority are from the US. Just because Spanish is such a cultural thing in the US, And one of the fun facts is that we have more Spanish speakers in the US than in Spain. Due to our sheer, it's something like 51 million or something, due to the sheer amount of people coming in from Latin America.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I don't know specific numbers of how many people are learning Spanish in the US or in other countries. But for sure, the US is a big market for us. On the videos watched on YouTube, around half of the views are from the US. Of our paying subscribers, I'm not sure because I don't think we get that data directly, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was even more than half, because I get a feeling that Americans like to buy stuff and pay money for stuff. Or at least they have fewer problems with that than people from other countries that are more careful with which things they spend their money on and stuff.
For sure. Interesting. Now, I imagine that you've collaborated with people from all over the Spanish-speaking world. But is there any place that you would like to collaborate with? Is there one of my favorite fun facts about Spanish is that there is a small amount of Spanish speakers in Equatorial Guinea in Africa, for example, or Western Sahara.
It would be really cool to show that. I've thought about that. I've thought about maybe doing a trip there and talking to some people there to show. Eventually, we want to show all the different dialects. probably we won't be able to create a separate like 1,000-hour course for each of the dialects, but maybe we can have at the advanced level specific amount of content. I don't know, a few dozen hours for each dialect, so people who want to learn that dialect can get that input and at least get to be able to understand people from that country.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. People don't, when people think of Spanish, they think of Spain and they think of Latin America, but there are Western Sahara, and then also Equatorial Guinea have some degree of Spanish ability. Now, I do have to say that in Portuguese, some of my favorite content comes out of Africa because it's so utterly different than what you see in Southeast Asia, or what you see in Latin America, or you see in Europe. So I very much enjoy watching people from Mozambique and Angola do things in Portuguese. So unfortunately, the Equatorial Guinea is a very small country, and their political situation is not the best. So I don't think there's a huge amount of content creators coming from Equatorial Guinea.
Even try to find, because as a Spanish person, I think most of us have had any exposure to what Spanish from Equatorial Guinea sounds like. So I had to look for it on YouTube, and I found some videos, but there's even there's not a lot of content.
Yeah, I think they're under like a dictatorship and some other stuff. I think it's, in addition to being a small country, they don't have a lot of connections. I'm not really sure. I'm totally out of my water here, out of my element, talking about things I don't actually know. But I imagine the situation's not the most conducive to making content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you have mentioned 1,000 hours a whole bunch of times. So how did you come to this 1,000 hours number?
This is based both on the data compiled in the ALG school in Bangkok for people learning Thai who are coming from different backgrounds, because they have like separate data for Westerners, for people from other Southeast Asian countries, for people from China learning the language. It's based on that, and then on my own experience learning both Thai and then learning other languages, both like Japanese and then other languages that are closer to Spanish or to other European languages. And it's surprisingly accurate. Most people who have racked up their hours on Dreaming Spanish and have received, I don't know, hundreds of hours or more than 1,000 hours, most people say that it's been really accurate for them.
And right now, how many hours of content do you guys offer?
Right now, I'm not sure where we're at. We may have reached already 800 hours, I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, I suppose sometime either this year or early next year probably we'll get to 1,000 hours. But then we may still want to go a bit farther ahead to make sure we have not just enough content, but enough content of high enough quality, and that can be structured into some kind of guided course, so it's easy for people to know what they can do next. Still, you're still gonna have a lot of freedom to choose what input with content you're gonna consume, but I want to give some kind of structure so people who want it and who want help, who don't want to have to decide every day which video they're gonna watch, can just go there and consume the course.
That is an issue, the paradox of choice. If you go to a hamburger restaurant and they serve hamburger, chicken sandwich, and French fries, then you've got 3 things you're going to choose from. It's not hard to make your decision. But if you go to a restaurant with like 30 things on the menu, it's a lot harder to choose.
Yeah, and it's a concept it's used a lot in any kind of like business or kind of the startup. The startup world is reduce friction and reduce cognitive load that you put on your users. The fewer steps they have to do to start using your product or your service, the better, right?
Right. Now, what is your stance on choosing a dialect to focus on? So, when would you advise people start branching out into other varieties of the target language? Right from the get-go, after 1,000 hours?
I guess it's up to the person. Personally, for example, I'm learning Mandarin. If I could have 1,000 hours of content that's all coming from Taiwan, I would do it. I don't mind a lot consuming also content from mainland China, but if I could, I probably would. I don't have a specific recommendation other than if you at the beginning consume content from different dialects, that's fine. That's completely fine. If you have enough content and want to focus on just one country, then that's also fine. I don't know. When I learned English, I consume mostly content from the US. I knew that I also wanted to understand British English, and I also consumed enough TV and movies from the UK. But I know I never made any conscious effort of learning English from other places, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Scotland. Yeah, because I don't know, it was not necessary. What's that?
Did you ever avoid content that was not in American English?
No,
So
no,
one thing
I
that-
didn't.
I've seen refolders do this, where they actually avoid. I think our official recommendation is not to focus on a dialect until you decide to start speaking. So something like after you have at least a vocab of 5,000 lemmas. But yeah, I'm not very big. I think exposure is important. And I think if you reduce exposure to different varieties of a language, you're going to have a hard time. It's something I saw. I used to work for an eikaiwa. And I would have Japanese students who only ever heard standard American English. And they would be like, I can't understand my coworker from England. I can't understand my coworker from Singapore. And I'm like, that's because you've only ever had exposure to American English. And you have to kind of get used to the variations.
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's something that you can do, and the higher your level is at the language in general, also the easier it becomes. So it's never too late. I know it depends on the person, and there's this guy Jonathan who learned Spanish really well with Dreaming Spanish, and he's from the UK, and he really wanted to learn Spanish from Spain, so he just watched our content from Spanish guides, my content and Sandra's content, and yeah, he learned to speak Spanish like very close to the way a Spanish person speaks. And we didn't have enough content from just people from Spain, so he did also some, I don't know if you know what crosstalk is.
I do know what crosstalk is, yes, where you speak in one language and your partner speaks in the other.
Yes, so you're only listening to the language you're learning, and then you're speaking all the time in the language that the other person is learning. So he did that with people from Spain, and then I guess after that he also started just having conversations in Spanish with both people speaking Spanish, specifically with people from Spain, and that was important for him because he was thinking in the future to spend time in Spain, and he wanted to talk like people from there. And sure, in the future, if he's exposed to other kinds of Spanish, maybe at the beginning it will be hard for him. But with a bit of input, probably it will not be hard for him to be able to understand Spanish from any country.
Yeah, Spanish has been very rewarding. My Spanish is not great. We have a vocabulary test that our data scientists and our linguists put together. And I tested somewhere around 5,000 unique words. So again, these are like lemmas, right? So like go, goes, going, went are all one lemma. But it's been very rewarding. Even in the States, you can use it pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I get to use it for work. I get to answer support tickets in Spanish. And we sell Anki decks. And, an Anki deck is a mazo in Spanish. And it's really interesting to me because when you learn a foreign language, you tend to be exposed to like standard language. So books that are spell checked, things like that. And it's been very interesting to see the number of misspellings that native speakers have. So
A lot more
number
than
of
in
times-
Japanese, huh?
yeah, the number of times that I see maso spelled with an S is very high every single day. I'm imagining obviously these are not Spaniards, but it's interesting to me because there are some native speaker spelling errors that I see in Spanish, and it's sort of like in English, right? We've got your, Y-O-U-R, Y-O apostrophe R-E, so on and so forth.
So probably native speakers make more this mistake than foreigners.
Correct. So you see these native speaker mistakes, and that's been very interesting. But it's very rewarding as well. You know, I have to say, I really would love to get into some of the endangered varieties of Spanish that are spoken in the US. So you've got New Mexican Spanish, you've got Isleño Spanish. So part of Louisiana, for example, was settled by people from the Canaries. And there's a small population of people there who speak, you know, something equivalent to Canarian Spanish. But I've just not had the opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know much about those. I've heard, I think in a video there was an old man speaking New Mexican Spanish, or I don't know if it's New Mexican or something even more specific that was spoken just in a town or a handful of towns.
Yeah, New Mexican Spanish is very different, I think. It's sort of divergent. I think, and I also am quite a big fan of Ladino, spoken by, you know, the Sephardic Jews who were kind of expelled. And I found it all very rewarding, you know. So you got a big fan of your language over here. I think Spanish is very rewarding.
Keep up with it.
Thank you. And it helps a lot with Filipino. A lot of vocab is just Spanish. Something like 30 to 40% of Filipino vocab is Spanish. And that's been very helpful as well. Yeah. So when you make content, what is your favorite type of content to make in terms of making like a video for your channel?
I guess my favorite kind is talking about things that I like myself, like researching about topics that I'm interested in and then explaining those. Like anything related with science, about animals, about I know psychology and behavior, stuff like that.
What is your least favorite type of content to make?
About topics that I have no interest in, like I know football, or for a while I had on Patreon I had a tier in which people who paid a certain amount each month could ask me to make a video about a specific topic that month. And there was one patron who every month he asked for a video about dancing, about like bachata and salsa and stuff. And I would do it, but also I was, I don't know, kind of researching it and falling asleep while I was researching it.
So making content for things that you do not enjoy. I can't imagine. I think it's quite difficult to talk about things in depth and be a content creator when other people are directing your content. So an early format of the Refold Podcast is there used to be more hosts. It wasn't just me, and we would take a community poll each week, and the community would decide the topic. And sometimes the community would pick a topic that we just didn't have any input on. You know, either it was very specific, or we weren't like, you know, we didn't want to sell ourselves as an expert on a topic we didn't know about. And that can be tough, for sure. You mentioned,
and it shows when you're talking about that, it shows that you're getting bored and the audience is watching you and probably also getting bored.
So I take it you nixed that. You don't do that anymore.
Yes, at some point I got rid of that tier. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. When I joined Refold, I didn't have any dreams of being a content creator. I joined as like a paid moderator, moderating the community, eventually a coach. But when we started the podcast, I definitely realized it can be tough having other people direct your content and what you're going to talk about. So
yeah, you can get ideas from people, and that helps you maybe find any blind spots of things that you haven't thought of. But for sure, you have to be vetoing. You have to be choosing like things that you really believe are gonna be popular, and things that you are really interested in.
Another thing that I have seen in the Refold community that can be quite tough is live Q&As are quite tough. If you've got people ask, I'm not sure if you have ever done this, but live Q&As where people are submitting questions in real time, that can be difficult, especially if they ask you questions that you're not prepared to answer.
Okay, I've done a few of these, but the thing is, I've been thinking about all this stuff nonstop since 2013. So I never was in a position in which I thought, oh, I don't know how to answer this. I thought probably if they ask me something, it's something that I've thought about a few times already. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I started with AJAT in 2010.
2010.
Yes.
So it has been 13 years of you being an immersion learner.
Yes. Yeah. Before that, maybe, I don't know, if you consider, I was never doing so many hours with, for example, with English, but I learned quite a bit of English just listening to podcasts, watching movies and stuff. And I believe that I had to practice speaking, but I just never got to it because it's just a lot harder than just getting input.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my Spanish is, again, passable. I can use it to communicate, doing support tickets, answer people's questions. My listening is awful. I have done very little listening. I recently started a book, Cadáver Exquisito. So that's sort of an Argentinian horror book. And I'm listening to the audiobook, and it's definitely a struggle. I sacrifice my listening. When I learned Spanish, I did it very traditionally for a couple of years. And then I started reading. I read The Little Prince. I started reading native books, graded readers. And I actually never really used it, and I still don't use it as a spoken language. It's almost purely written. And I will say that my listening ability in Spanish suffered from that because I took such a written sort of reading approach.
Yeah, of course, if you don't listen much, then, I don't know, suffer in the sense that if you had spent part of that time listening, then for sure your listening would be a lot better. Then also, like one of the things that we advocate for in Dreaming Spanish or in Dreaming Languages is that delaying reading a bit is probably going to be helpful to get your native language to have less influence on the way you speak, to have less of an accent.
Yeah. And one of the craziest things for me is that sometimes, like I mentioned, Filipino languages use a lot of Spanish words, but there are two big things. The first one, pronunciation is sometimes different. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the word book in Filipino is libro. Does not really sound like Spanish. It's different vowels, right? It's lax y libro. The other thing is like, again, pronunciation, right? So like Cilia, they still have the distinction with the ly in a lot of words. Cuchillo for a knife.
Okay.
And I think this is sort of old-fashioned in modern Spanish. I feel like most people are yeístas and they merge them.
Because we have that distinction in Catalan, but I'm not sure in Old Spanish if it was pronounced the same as Catalan is nowadays, or it was a bit different.
Yeah, and they spell it differently too, right? So like cuchillo is spelled Kutsilyo, for example, in Filipino.
TS, okay.
Yeah, TS. I'm not sure why they went with TS for the ch sound, but they did. They did. Um, and also there are sometimes like difference in words, like casillas, for example, refers to an outhouse,
Okay.
like going to the bathroom outside. So I guess in like modern Spanish, that's more like a locker, maybe.
Yeah, it can be a locker. Yeah, this always happens with loan words, right? They kind of change their meaning when going from one language to the other.
Yeah. The other issue is sometimes if you know the word in Filipino, guessing if it has a P or an F in Spanish, because all of the F words
Oh,
become P words. So like a match is
yeah,
posporo,
Filipinas,
uh,
right?
Filipinas, posporo, things like this. And sometimes if I try and Hispanicize the word, I get it wrong.
Okay.
It's like, okay, that's actually a P, not an F, and so on and so forth. But it's been a very rewarding experience.
Yeah. This happens all the time with, I guess, with Japanese and also with Thai, which in certain positions of the word they just don't have many available sounds, so they have to simplify. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes the words are, I don't know, are sometimes they're regional. Like uh, it's sort of like a blend of different Spanish dialect words that they use.
Mhm.
So, for example, they call potatoes patatas. They call sweet potatoes camote.
Okay.
Um, uh, then they call avocado avocado. Uh, so
Okay.
like, but they call a car coche, Kotse. So like,
Mhm.
you know, it's sort of like a mix, I think, sometimes of different dialect words, um, and that's been also very interesting to see.
I wonder if are you gonna try to learn Chavacano?
So with Chavacano, I actually do not struggle very much. It's not bad. So um, the biggest issue with Chavacano is understanding where words are different. Um, like, for example, instead of saying que, they say cosa.
Mhm.
So cosa tu nombre, like what's your name? Things like that can be difficult, but the actual grammar is very easy because it's just you put ta, ya, or I in front of the verb, and you use the third person present. So habla, está hablando, things like that. So it's pretty simple. It's not actually bad. I listen to a lot of Chavacano music,
Mhm.
and it's definitely one of the hidden gems. So for listeners, if you're not aware, Chavacano is a Spanish-based Creole language spoken in the Philippines. So the grammar is different, but the vocab is Spanish. And yeah, it's very rewarding. By the way, I highly recommend it. There's some good music out there, and yeah, for sure.
I may try it someday.
Yeah, you should. I think it would be really cool. So, Pablo, before we go, is there anything I didn't get to ask you that you wanted to talk about on the podcast today?
Hmm. Not really. Like one piece of advice that I usually give is that learning a language, especially learning a language well, learning a language like acquiring it so that you actually get a feel for what the language is like and you can speak it without having to think about it, about what you're saying. It's something that you make very like piecewise progress. You make progress, but like very little by little. Sometimes it's very hard to notice, and you takes such a long time that you once you get to your goal, you don't kind of it doesn't feel like it's such a big deal anymore because you've already spent weeks and months almost there, and before that you were almost there, and so there's never like a big reward at the end. So just enjoy all the way there. Enjoy what you're doing in your day to day. Try to get exposure with content that you enjoy watching rather than like suffer through it and expect that there's going to be a big reward at the end.
So step by step, no big steps, right? No big jumps. and make it enjoyable. I would agree with that for sure. All right. And Pablo, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.